Hello everyone, my name is Shauna Hicks and my session is Digging Deeper into Australian Archives. The content of this video, as well as the thoughts, views and opinions expressed herein belong solely to me and do not necessarily reflect the views of FamilySearch International and RootsTech. Australian family history is largely dependent on our own history and geography. Our colonies were created at different times. The borders changed. And then in 1901, the colonies joined together for the Federation of Australia. You need to know when all of that happened because that determines where the records were. Another complicating factor, place names have changed, especially after each World War, for example. German place names in Queensland and South Australia were changed to reflect the anti-German feeling at that time. You have to remember that Australia is a huge country. Most of Europe will fit inside Australia. You think about the geographic distance between places. How far is it? Is it likely that they met? If it's different colonies, it may not be the right person. You have to know that place and time because there's no central record keeping. All of the colonies had their own records, and most of those records went into the states as well. And there is no central record keeping except for things like naturalizations and immigration to a certain extent and military. So we'll come through some of those records as we progress. You also need to think about your given names and your surnames. You have to be aware of variants because most archive spelling, you have to be specific. You have to put the right spelling in or the right variant. For example, William, search for William, but also search for WM or W because it is how it is recorded in the record and that's how you will find it. This is a map of Australia in 1851 when Victoria was separated from New South Wales. At that time, it still surrounded South Australia with a gap between South Australia and Western Australia. You'll see New Zealand down in the bottom right corner. That was once part of New South Wales. So be aware of all these changing borders and setting up of different colonies and territories. The article Territorial Evolution of Australia in Wikipedia helps to spell this out. So definitely have a read of that particular article. Cindy's List is another portal site that will give you lots and lots of links to different aspects of family history in Australia. You will find archives under libraries, archives and museums, but this list is a lot more than just archives. So I recommend having a good look through some of those topics. Looking at the government archives now, we have the National Archives of Australia and all of the state and territory archives, which I've listed there. The URLs are in the handout. You have to remember that not everything is name indexed or place indexed. If it's in a file name, then yes, you may find it in a catalogue, but there are lots and lots of series of records that are not indexed and you use the catalogue to find them. Not everything is online. Archives are free to search online and in person, and you can download digital copies if they exist. I can't stress enough that you need to read online guides and use help. They will help you to find what you're looking for. The National Archives of Australia, most of the records are post 1901 when Federation occurred. However, there will be some colonial records, as I said, naturalisations, passenger lists, and military records. You do need to check both the National Archives and the relevant state archive for records in particular categories and time periods. Record Search is the name of their online catalogue. They also have photo search and name search. Name search has a number of filters that help to make it easier to find certain categories of records. But it also might mean that you miss something because it's filtered out or not within that filter. I tend to use a basic and advanced search as well, because that way I'm less likely to miss reference to a person's name. The Passengers Index is from 1890 and records ships coming into Fremantle. People arrived in Fremantle, but they then moved on to the eastern states. So some may have got off in Perth in Western Australia, but they will have also got off in Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane, and that's reflected in the passenger list. World War I Army dossiers are digitised. You can search for them easily and download. There are dozens and dozens of fact sheets that will suggest all kinds of things that may be relevant to your family history. Have a look at them. This is the search screen for record search. I'm doing a basic search here, not on a person's name, but I'm looking for people born in America that appear in the National Archives catalogue. You could put Germany, Sweden, or whatever country. You could put a state, a colony, a province, any of those sorts of things, or death, or whatever. But I have put in America and birth. That returns 549 results. And the example that I've got here is two World War II files. One has been digitised. You can see the icon at the top for the person born in New York. The person born in Chicago, it hasn't been digitised, but you could order a copy and pay for it, and then it would appear online. So it can be searched in a variety of different ways. Moving on to the state archives now, New South Wales was the first colony established. It started with a convict system from 1788 to 1842. After that, free immigration picked up, and you will find that the population increased. There are online indexes plus the online catalogue. You need to check both, they are not inclusive. So follow the online topic guides. Wills and probate are particularly complicated in New South Wales, so I definitely recommend following that guide. Collection Search is the online catalogue, and you can search that. Research A to Z, you can put in a letter I for immigration, and it will bring up those guides and indexes. The e-newsletter is called Now and Then. The example I'm giving you today is jail inmates or prisoner photos 1870 to 1930. This also has place of birth indexed, and so I used the search term USA this time, and it brought up a number of people. There are three in this example, and we're going to follow through on Clarence Alfred Wright at the bottom, who was born in Georgia in 1885. There's his photo on the left. You can see he arrived in Australia in 1912. He's Methodist, read and write. He's got height, weight, light brown hair and eyes, and the description also goes on to things about teeth, tattoos, scars, any identifying feature. Now, Clarence's crime was to travel by cab and not pay the fare. Also, false pretenses. He had two charges in 1913. Each attracted a fine or 3 months in jail. He appears in jail, so we can assume he didn't have the money to pay the fine. And we have this excellent record of him. While going through the jail photos, I also came across Samuel Smith. He was a seaman, and he's arrived on the ship in 1900. Many seamen jumped ship during the gold rushes, and it's very hard to find them because there's no record of them coming in. They may have changed their name. There's usually only a record if they're caught. And then they would have spent some time in jail or returned to their ship. So I just put that one in just to mention that people did jump ship. I'm not saying that Samuel Smith did, but you often do find seamen in jail for that reason. Queensland State Archives. Queensland started in 1824 as the Moreton Bay Penal Settlement. So it had convicts, not a great deal, but it was a place of punishment. In 1842, free settlement opened up after the convict settlement had closed down. It became a self-governing colony in 1859. You have the online catalogue, you have indexes online, they're PDF files which you can download. There are online guides as well. The e-newsletter is QSA Bulletin for new updates. Looking at their catalogue, I focused on school admission registers as an example for this talk. And what I found going through the little podcast here, 4 tips to finding school admissions, they had used Barton State School in their example. I went to Barton in the 1950s, and this photo brought back so many memories of my school days or early school days. So you never know where you're going to come across a record that might be relevant for you. Check everything. South Australia. It was founded in 1834. It was never a convict colony. At times, it was responsible for the Northern Territory. You have an online catalogue, online family history guides. The indexes in South Australia are within FamilySearch, which is their catalogue. You can find World War I photos, passenger lists. Some of the South Australian records have been indexed and digitised by FamilySearch. It may be easier sometimes to use FamilySearch than ArchiveSearch. This is a snapshot of the searching screen, and it is a bit clunky. It's a first generation database. Most of the other state archives have moved on and have moved to different platforms. This one is still very much as it was a few years ago. You can use it and you can find things, but as I said, the records that are digitized by FamilySearch, you may find them easier if you go to the location Australia in FamilySearch and drill down to South Australia, and you've got immigrant ship papers, prison records, school admission, wills and probate. So you can search them in FamilySearch. If you want other things, you can go back to South Australia and use the catalogue there. Tasmania. It was a convict colony and it became independent from 1825. It's independent from New South Wales in 1825. It was known as Van Diemen's Land. You'll see that on the records, VDL, Van Diemen's Land. It obtained self-government in 1856, and that's when it changed its name to Tasmania. They wanted to distance themselves from their convict background. They also adopted a less detailed civil registration system. And again, that was to hide convicts in the family. So you won't find parents' names on marriage certificates or parents' names on death certificates. They're fairly basic records, but they are online and they are free, and it's up to 1900. So it's a bit of a trade-off there, but we do find that it's not as helpful as the certificates in the eastern states. There are a couple of ways of getting into the records. They have an excellent Tasmanian name index, which has a lot of different record series in it, and it's the first place to go. But you also need to check the Online Archives catalogue, because there are different records in there that are not necessarily in the Tasmanian name index. They have also got a lot of digitised records, and in particular you'll find convict records, photographs and wills. There are family history guides as well. Libraries Tasmania is the place to go, and you can see in their search page there, you've got the library catalogue, you've got Tasmanian Archives, you've got the names index and their website. You can search all together, or you can focus on one. So in this example, I've highlighted Tasmanian Archives. I've put in some family names, and I know that other members of the family have put their family papers into the Tasmanian Archives, and I can call them up by looking in the archives, but I won't find them, this particular collection, in the Tasmanian Names Index, which is why you need to search both. If you search Tasmanian Archives, the name index, you can put in a person's name, but again, I have used an example, United States, and it has turned up a number of people from the United States, and I've picked John Lancaster, who arrived on the Blackfriar. You can download these records for free. It's a death record, and as I said, it doesn't give you parents' names, but it does give you place of origin. It will give you occupation, age, what they were suffering from. He was in Hobart Hospital with diarrhea, and the date of death, if that's applicable. And so you get some information, but it doesn't have the parents' names. And in this example, it says he's buried by friends. And that suggests that he probably didn't have family here. Victoria was settled from 1839 and became a colony in 1851. The 1850s gold rushes brought people from all over the world. People were jumping ship. There was not enough crew to sail ships back. It was a chaotic time, the 1850s in Victoria. Some Tasmanian convicts also decided to leave Tasmania and move to Victoria after their sentences finished. They may have moved on to other states as well. I've put a shortcut here to the online collections, but I encourage you to explore what is not online as well. There are digitised records for asylums, inquests, maps and plans, prisons, wills and probates, and so on. The e-newsletter is called Dispatch. This is an example from the immigration section, just to give you an idea of the different kinds of immigration schemes that were around. For example, we know from 1901, Australia was a federated country, and yet some of the states still had their own immigration schemes. So you can see Victoria had a scheme from 1946 to 1983 to bring out British immigration. Victoria is also different in that it has got records of coastal passenger lists, and these can be useful to check for people who may have been moving between the states. It's also got assisted and unassisted records and outward passenger lists, people leaving Victoria. Most of the other states don't have these types of records, and that's why Victoria is an interesting place to research. An example from a digitised will. Again, I used United States as a search term. I have Helen Reid here, who was in Jolimont near Melbourne, but later Brooklyn, New York in the US. And she's died here, but she was formerly in New York. So there may be people in your family tree who have disappeared from the US and they've moved down under for whatever reason. In Victoria, there may be one or more files for probate. So make sure that you pick up all the files that are relevant. Western Australia, it was never part of New South Wales. It was originally known as New Holland. First became the Swan River Colony and then Western Australia. They had trouble attracting immigrants and people to Western Australia because it was so remote. And so they brought in a penal settlement from 1850 to 1887, which also encouraged people to come out as prison guards and stay on with land grants and what have you. So the Fremantle Prison online database is a good place to go in the beginning, but the State Records Office also has convict records. A guide to researching in Western Australia is Dead Reckoning. It's a library guide, but it's how to find your way through the genealogical jungle of Western Australia. It takes into account state records, Western Australia, the Batty Library, personal archives, and all kinds of things. So it's an excellent way to find records on Western Australia. The catalogue itself is not that user-friendly, I don't think. If you're looking for the search button or the search screen, it's actually at the top of the page. You can see my red arrow there, and that's the search button. You can browse certain categories, or you can put in search terms. I've put in Bullen, which is one of my surnames. It brings back 44 results. Now, most of those people do connect to my own Bullen family in Western Australia. So it's a question of how you search. A full name, surname, place, and of course, if you're looking for series of records, you have to use the online catalogue and search not just for items, but for series. We've now run out of time, unfortunately, but I will be staying on for an hour to answer any questions that you might have. And I thank you today for listening, and my contact details are also here on this final screen. So thank you very much for attending my talk, and good luck with your research in Australia.